How's it going, everyone? Rosendo from MLH here, once again with an amazing workshop in store for you. It is just now turning 4 p.m. EST. I'm in New York, so let us know where in the world you're joining us from. Hope you're excited. This is going to be a great one. If you've never used Crystal before, it's a programming language. It's going to be a session that covers the basics and just walks you through some really cool stuff that you could build using Crystal. So, yeah, if you're excited, let us know in the chat. If you have any questions throughout the workshop, make sure to drop them in there. We'll make sure that we get to each and every one of them. And yeah, 1:30 a.m. in India. That is pretty late, but I am glad to see you here. Really glad to hear it. That's some dedication to just Global Hack Week in general. So really appreciate it. Outside of that, I'm gonna stop taking up too much of your time here and go ahead and bring on our speaker for the day, Beta. All right.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today on the MLH. I'm Beta Siliani. I'm Crystal Core team member, and I work at Manastech. And first of all, a round of acknowledgements. Thanks to MLH for inviting us here. Thanks to 84 Codes for partnering with us in this joint Crystal Loving MQ session. I hope you can hear me well. Let me know otherwise. And with that, let's start sharing my screen. All right. So what do we have in agenda today? First, I'm going to give you a bird's view of the language, and we're going to code a little example, not really a hello world, but something. Oops, I'm hearing that my voice is a little bit low. I try to speak louder. Thanks for telling me. So I was saying, first we are going to code a little example to get an idea of how it feels to program in Crystal. Then I'm going to dive further into the features of Crystal. And at the end of the talk, I'm going to devote some time to what it means to be an open source contributor, in particular for Crystal. With that, let me tell you who I am. Well, as I said already, I'm Beta Siliani from Manastech, and you can reach me in all these different forms. And you can follow the slide if you scan the code in the screen. So, why would you want to learn Crystal? Well, for us, Crystal has a lot of goodies, and some of that comes from the inheritance from Ruby, because we like Ruby, and we said, hey, we would like to have a language like Ruby, but with some other more stuff. So we inherited the syntax from Ruby, and if you like Ruby, you will like Crystal in the syntax. If you don't like Ruby, you will likely not like Crystal. Let me say that. Not every language is for everybody. But the truth is that Crystal, like Ruby, is very productive in the sense that you can very concisely say what you have in mind, put that in your program, and that being work. In other languages, for instance, sometimes you need to write a lot of boilerplate code in order to get the same idea. And we say that Crystal is versatile because you can code all sorts of things with Crystal. We have several frameworks, web frameworks on Crystal. We have even a kernel for an operating system. That's a bit of a stretch, let me say, but you have many other applications. For instance, LovingMQ is a queue system that 84 Codes code in Crystal. And as I mentioned, it's a simple language, it's intuitive, meaning that there aren't many strange concepts that you need to learn. If you know Python, Ruby, Java, you will be fine with Crystal. So far, what I said is almost true for Ruby. What's the difference with Crystal? Well, Crystal is statically typed, meaning that when you make a mistake in your code, the type checker will tell you before compiling and running your code. So that error will not show up in production. But that means you have to put some types. But it has a powerful type inference mechanism that infers a lot of the types, so you don't have to worry about them. They exist, they are there, but often you don't have to worry about them. And as I mentioned, it compiles, and it compiles to a highly efficient machine code. So you get a binary that you can throw in a server, and it will run, as long as it has the sufficient libraries, it will run, and it will run efficiently. You don't need to have anything installed from Crystal to make it work. And one last comment that I'm going to mention later, it has an intuitive concurrency model. If you know Go, you will feel also at home with Crystal. So I hear a question. So basically, like C, if you mean in terms of performance, it's in the ballpark of C, C++, Java, all the usual suspects. I'm going to mention a bit more about this later. So, how does Crystal look like? Let's code a little simple example. I hope you can see my screen. I hope you can read it. Otherwise, let me know. We are going to code a jukebox. What is a jukebox? A collection of songs. Will be a very simple jukebox because we don't have that much time. But let's start with a song. So we have class song. Crystal is object-oriented, like Ruby. And well, what are the properties of a song? We can say, for instance, we have the artist, and that will be a string. And we have the name of the song, another string. Let's make it very simple, right? We are not going to have also class for artist and so on. This will be a very short example. Now, when we have the properties, we like encapsulation, good object orientation encapsulation. That means we want to get the getters to access these fields. So we can say, for instance, if artist, that's equal to artist. What I'm calling here is a method, artist, that will access the field, the object field, the instance variable, that's how we call it, called artist. And you will see an error here. I'm going to mention why this is complaining. But let's do the same for name. Oops. All right. So are we ready? Can we now create a song? Well, there's a problem. And this is what this is telling me. And it's saying, hey, you have a string, but it's not initialized. And Crystal will not let you artist go null or be a nil, depending on which side of the world you come. You might call it nil or null. But it has to have a concrete string. And I have several ways to do that. One way is simply to say, okay, let's put a default, unknown, right? Now it's going to complain about the name. Sorry, this way. Now it's complaining about the name. But let's do something better. When we create a song, we're going to pass the artist and the name. And we do that with the initializer. The initialize method will take an artist and a name, and will set the artist and the name of the song. Now this works, but it's complaining down here because we need to pass in, of course, the name of the artist and the song. Now, I'm a bit, I come from another time where Roxette was a thing, and Joyride was one of their the best known songs. I don't like that song, but it's short enough to put it here. Anyway, we can now create another song. That's from my favorite Argentinian artist, Charlie Garcia. All right. So we have two songs. Cool. But now we want to print them on screen, let's say. And well, I can simply say, okay, the artist is song one dot artist, and so on, and repeat that for the other song. But it's going to get boring very easily. Let's instead add a method here to come up with a string. This is how we call it, toString, of a string representation of this song. And what we're going to do is to simply say artist, comma, name. All right, so now we can put here song one dot to s, put song two to s, and we run this thing. It's compiling, and we get the two songs. All right, so cool. Now we want our shootbox to include songs, right? I should create a class and do a lot of things, but let's keep it simple for now. Let's make songs equals a set of songs, and let's add our new songs. If you come from C++ or Ruby, you will understand what this means. This basically means push that into the container, in this case, songs. Right? And we can create a print songs that, given a set, will iterate over the songs in the set and print those. Set dot each do. So for each song, we put song to s, and we can delete this and instead print songs of our songs. Maybe this is getting a bit more confusing, but basically what we are doing is iterating and printing all our songs. We get the same result as before. All right, now there's a bug in this program that is very subtle. What happens if I create a new song? Let's call it song 3. That is exactly the same as the song 1, the one by Roxette. What is going to happen? What do you expect printing song to do? Well, it will print 3 songs, but it's a set. Why a set? Because we want the songs to be unique. So basically what is happening is that Crystal doesn't know how to compare our songs. We want our songs to be compared by artist and name. We have to tell this to Crystal. I can go here and define the equals operator and so on. But instead of doing that, I'm going to call a nice macro called I will explain what a macro is in a minute. Def equals and hash, and I say artist and name. And now, if I didn't make any mistake, it prints just two. There it goes. Basically, what I said is, okay, compare our songs using artist and name. And I do that with this little helper that is creating that code for us. We don't have to write it down. In fact, a lot of the things that I put here can be simplified by calling other macros that are there in the standard library. For instance, this is a getter. And now we can remove all these getters and get that for free. And this is complaining because I erased too much here. And now, boom, it works. Much fewer code, but not less readable. We're saying, okay, we have a getter artist and a getter for name. All right, this is a bit of a magic that we do with macros. I will explain how that works in a minute. All right, so there's one more aspect that I want to highlight of Crystal. I mentioned that this string here, it cannot be a nil. It cannot be a null object. That means, in particular, you are certain that every time that you access the artist, you will have a string. You cannot get a null pointer exception. But what if we do want to have a null object? Well, we can simply say like this. This is the same as saying string or nil, because Crystal has union types. So you can declare a variable, an object to be either of one type or another type. In this case, nil is the type of the nil object, which you can think of it as a null. This is nil in the Ruby sphere. And why do we want to do that? Well, there might be a reason. It's kind of, I'm faking it for this example, but still, say that we don't have an artist because, well, some songs, they don't have really an artist, like the Happy Birthday song. Who created the Happy Birthday song? Who knows? It's folklore now. Oops. What problem do we have now when we add the Happy Birthday song to our list of songs? How is it going to print that? Not very nice, right? It's a comma there. Let's fix that. So now our artist can be null or nil. So let's say if we have an artist, then we print this. Otherwise, we only print the name. Well, the name is actually a string, so I can just return that. So now we run this again, and it's printing nicely. So what is going on here? When I said if artist, what I'm saying is if artist is not nil, then do this. Otherwise, do the other stuff. And when I'm here, actually, an interesting fact that I'm going to mention just in the passing, in this point, artist is string. If we print the type of string here, let's do that for debugging purposes. Type of artist. Oh, so where is, that's not in the output? I know. Did I save this? Ah, there it is. I haven't saved it. It's telling me that is string or nil. Why is that? Okay, this let's forget about this. Sorry to confuse you. I need to check before I write. This is what happens for improvising. Anyway, I hope you got a taste of what coding Crystal looks like. Let me go back to the uh, presentation. So your first step forward, if you want to try Crystal, is to install it. There is also a playground that you can play online, but you probably want to install this to make the challenges. It's supported in many platforms, and most of the operating systems should include an easy way to install Crystal. If you are one of those that has a very weird version of Linux and whatever, you will know how to compile it from sources. I mean, you have experienced this before already. But in the end, you should come up something similar to this. The last version is 1.13.3. Fun fact, next week we are releasing the 1.14. And another fun fact is that I didn't mention is that the Crystal language has 10 years of development already. So, okay, we passed through this to get into a more interesting topic that I haven't covered in the live coding session. Crystal is batteries included. What does it mean? Basically, with the standard library, you can do a lot of things. For instance, this short little code shows how to create an HTTP server that you can run in your computer, and every time that you hit it, it will respond, "Hello, Crystal." This is what is here, right? And it has JSON to read and write JSON, YAML. It has a lot of things, the standard library. So you can start coding very easily any problem. More importantly, we mentioned a lot that with Crystal, you can compile and get a binary and an efficient one. In order to do that, you have to say to the compiler, hey, build a release version of my program. That will take some time because it will spend time optimizing it. But once you have that, you have a very efficient program to run. In this case, for instance, the HTTP server that I mentioned can handle 100,000 connections like nothing. Actually, if you look into this benchmark that I link here, and you can get the slides later on to get this link. There's a benchmark of web frameworks, and Crystal frameworks are competitive with the most performant frameworks in other languages too. So I mentioned several times that Crystal is statically typed, but it being typed doesn't mean that it loses the dynamic feel that you get from Ruby or Python. Let me give you this example. We have this addition method that takes two objects and applies the plus operator to them. Now, the plus operator is defined for integers. So when you call add 1, 2, well, it produces 3. But it's also defined for strings. So when you pass two strings, it concatenates the strings. This is what the plus operator means in Crystal, for strings. But if you pass something that is wrong, for instance, a string and a number, it will say, no, sorry, you cannot plus these two things. So whenever, look, that we never mentioned what A and B are, and it manages to handle, as long as what you are passing makes sense for the plus operator, this will be fine. And this gives Crystal this dynamic feeling that you get from Ruby or Python, that you don't have to be super explicit about what are the types, what is the interface, do they have the plus operator, all this bureaucracy that you usually need to do in other languages. So I have a question here. It says, is Crystal more often used for backend server coding? It's there are several applications for server coding, and backend definitely is one of them, but also for CLI tools for the command line. That's is where Crystal shines as well. But really, as I mentioned at the beginning, people use it for so many different things that it's hard to pinpoint what is best used for. There's a person who is using it to convert audio files, and yeah, so on. I hope I answered your question. Otherwise, please feel free to answer again, to ask again. All right, continuing on static typing. So static typing allows you to avoid errors. Like for instance, here we are creating an array with integers. So when we query the class of the object, it will say array of integers. And when you ask the type of the first element, it will tell you integer, all good. And when you try to pass a string, it will tell you no good. All right. Now, what if you do want to have integers or strings, and it just happens that at the beginning you just have integers? Can you do that? Yes, you can. This is when typing annotations helps you, and you can say, well, actually that array is not of integers, but it's an array of integers or strings. So now when you ask for the class, it will tell you it's an array of integers or strings. As a consequence, you can add an integer or a string, and this will work. But when you ask for the first element, in this case, well, it tells you it's an integer of a string. It can't tell you beforehand if this is an integer, even though we can see that it is an integer, the head element. But as long as you treat this element as integer or strings, and you, for instance, use the plus operator or anything that is defined for integers or strings, you're fine. And whenever you need to distinguish them, you can do that by matching the type. You say, if it's an integer, do this. If a string, do that. Another moment when you need to specify the types, for instance, is in the empty array. Because an empty array, we don't know. Crystal has no way of knowing what element it's going to contain. So there you have to say, okay, is empty array of string. Or similarly, like we did with set array string.new. This is covered in the live session, so I will skip this. So I mentioned that Crystal is compiled. That means that, well, if you don't, actually here is missing the release flag. So this is creating a pretty fat binary for something that just prints hello Crystal. But if you put release, this will be much smaller. But the point here is that you get an executable binary that you can execute. Why? Because all the runtime is embedded into the binary. And as an aside, there is a way of also putting the libraries by doing static linking, but we are not going to cover that. Okay, coming back. I mentioned that Crystal generates very efficient code. Is that because we are so super amazing developers that code all these optimizations in Crystal? Well, not really. I mean, some of that. But it's mostly because we are using the LLVM backend, which is a backend for compilers. Rust used that, for instance, and Rust says, hey, LLVM, I want to write this program. Can you optimize it for me and generate the binary? And LLVM takes care of that. The same happens with Crystal. It's very powerful and it's very efficient in the code that it generates. One consequence of having a compiled language is that you cannot be as dynamic as Ruby or Python or any other interpreted language. There are things where you need to that you cannot do. But for that, we cover most of it with metaprogramming using macros. I mentioned this already in the live coding session. The idea is a code that writes other code at compile time. So when we said macro getter, what we are saying, whenever we call getter, just paste whatever is in the body. So when Crystal sees this, it generates the following code. In this case, not very funny. I mean, it's just a comment, but if we flesh it in, that will be the code that will generate. For instance, the actual getter macro is something similar to this. It's more complex because it has more stuff, but in essence, it's something like this. The macro generates a definition that will be named after whatever you pass in here, and that will call to the instance variable with the same name. So now when we say getter foo, it says, okay, define foo as at foo. And so in this way, we can do a lot of things like when a class is being inherited, or when a method is missing and you're calling a method that doesn't exist, you can catch that at compile time and generate something. You can do a lot of things with macros. It's quite powerful. But I have to say, with power comes responsibility, so use it wisely. Okay, I'm not going to get into this. For the sake of time, how are we with time? Oh, we're good. I mentioned that Crystal has a very simple concurrency, a very powerful and simple concurrency. If you're familiar with coroutines, this will look very familiar. Basically, this is a little example that spawn several fibers, that's how we call it, Go routines in the Go sphere. Don't think of them as threads. They're not threads. They are something smaller, something lighter in particular. So what I'm doing here is 3 times I'm spawning, so I'm concurrently doing 3 times, sleeping some random time of seconds, and then sending some number over the channel. The channel is a way of connecting different fibers. Fibers communicate through channels. So then 9 times we receive from the channel and print the result. This will be basically random numbers because they won't be ordered, and this is what this is trying to capture. By the way, something that is a frequently asked question: why Crystal doesn't have the for keyword? It has something similar, like these 3 times is doing the same as a for. It's calling I, so it's calling whatever is here, passing this variable I with first 0, then 1, then 2. And you can do a step and whatever you can do with normal for in other programming languages, you can do this way. Actually, times is not a keyword of the language, it's actually a method that has nothing special to it. We like that. But many people complain about it not having for. Anyway, the important aspect of this slide is letting you know that you can concurrently do many tasks. But if you really have to do a lot of tasks, then go to LabMQ. They will tell you how to do it better than just trying to do it yourself. All right, moving forward. Crystal has a program called Shards to get your libraries. A library in the Crystal world is called a shard, because a shard, right, like a piece of crystal, your program is joining pieces of shards until you get your beautiful crystal. And basically, with a YAML file, with this format, you can say, okay, I depend on this shard MySQL that is defined here and with this particular version. So then you call shards install, and it will install that shard in your computer very easily. I'm going to stop here to talk, talking about the Crystal language, but you can start with a language introduction tutorial that we have in the documentation. It is quite simple and incomplete, let me be honest, but then you can jump from there to the reference manual to get into more interesting stuff. There is also an exercise track if you want to test yourself in a more ordered way. All right. Last part of this talk. Let's talk about what it means to contribute to open source, and in particular to Crystal. In open source, you know, the code is publicly available. In the license of Crystal, you can redistribute it, you can modify it. If you say, I want to make a better language than Crystal, you can take Crystal and modify it to make a better language. Let us know. We want to hear it. And one consequence of having this in the open is that we have contributors from all over the world that are helping us push Crystal forward. So what does it mean to contribute to Crystal? Well, Crystal is in GitHub in this link here, and you have to follow procedures that are partly associated to it being in GitHub and partly associated with how we want people to make their contributions. So for instance, the first step will be to fork Crystal into your own space in GitHub. The bad part is that you need GitHub, a GitHub account. Then you improve Crystal in your fork, ideally in a different branch from master. Please read the contribution guidelines. They detail several things that I'm not going to mention here. What's the best way for your contribution to be accepted into Crystal? And once you're ready, you can make a pull request and ask for a review. Now, what does it mean? That the core team members, like me or many others, will read your pull request and say, hey, this is actually a good addition. We are going to merge it. Or maybe we say, hey, you know, this part may be better this other way, and so on. And that's how it goes until your pull request is merged and you are officially a Crystal contributor. Now, it's easy to contribute to Crystal. Well, it is, because oops, I don't have it here. It is because Crystal is written in Crystal itself. So once you learn Crystal, you can contribute to the compiler or the standard library because all of that is built in Crystal. Some changes are small, like a typo here or a new method that does something that is interesting, but it wasn't considered in the original standard library. Some are much more harder, like, hey, I want to fix this bug in the compiler that is very deep into the compilation process. Of course, for that, you need more experience. But the good thing of contributing in an open source project is that it's a way for you to train yourself, for instance, in this case in Crystal, and also to show the world what you can do with it. So you can start building your profile by contributing to open source projects. The same goes as with LabMQ, of course. So, wrapping up now. We touch two different aspects. First and foremost, the Crystal, how it lets you write expressive code to build easy to maintain and highly performant systems. And then I briefly mentioned on how fun it is to contribute to open source and how that serves to help you build your own profile. About the first part, the expressivity of Crystal, this is partly because we have a legacy from Ruby, and also because it's batteries included. You can code programs, very interesting programs, just from using the standard library alone. There is, of course, other libraries that you can use, but you really don't require that to start with. And also, partly because of Ruby and because it is typed but not bureaucratic, the code that you write is very concise, very clean. And it's maintainable because with the stricter typing than with Ruby or Python, and the powerful inference engine allows you to be expressive but maintainable, meaning that whenever you make a change, the compiler will guide you and say, hey, you're breaking this part, you're breaking this other part, until you fix that, before having to see that in production. Crystal is highly performant, and this is for using LLVM as a backend. And also because the Crystal team and the community has an obsession with performance, and we are always trying to look for ways of getting more to it. By the way, as an aside, 84 Codes is helping us build better multi-threading support for Crystal to have more performance in multi-threading applications. This is something that is happening today. Won't be ready for the next release, but I hope it will be for the next release, 1.15. All fingers crossed. We hope we get there. Okay, I mentioned this already. Crystal is open source. You can read the code, and it's written in Crystal. So you can learn Crystal at the same time as understanding the standard library, the compiler, how we do things. So once you learn Crystal, you can start contributing to making Crystal. All right, and with that, thanks for staying with us. In particular, in India, it's 2:30, 2 something a.m., if I understand correctly, and for everyone else in the rest of the world. I can take now questions if you have them.
Hey, folks. Yeah, just want to reiterate here. First of all, thanks so much, Beta. I really appreciate you coming up in here, and yeah, letting us know about Crystal is very, very informative. I think a lot of the folks in the chat were really surprised and impressed with how efficient it looked and the syntactic ease that you could actually read through it. So really, thank you for the demo earlier. If y'all have any questions, definitely pop them in here, and it looks like we have some coming in. Um, First and foremost, someone's asking if you could share the GitHub link that you shared earlier, and if you want to drop that into the private chat, I can put it into the comment section for you.
All right, let's do that. Oops.
And while you do that, Isara asks, what were some major projects that have been used with Crystal? Oh, and looks like we have a ton of questions coming in. Let me just.
Hopefully, I didn't add any typo.
Looks good to me.
All right. So, major projects in Crystal. LevingMQ is probably the first one that comes to mind. The Crystal compiler is another one. The Kagi browser, if you've heard about it. A little advertisement for our friends from Kagi. They have a very fast, I said browser, I mean search engine. They created, they are doing that in Crystal. Actually, you can read through the success stories in the homepage of Crystal to know other applications. There's also the Nikola trucks. You know, the electric trucks. They use Crystal as part of their development in the truck itself. Yeah, those are the ones that comes to mind from the top of my head.
Awesome. Hopefully that answers your question, Isara. Next one up is from Rajat. Can one contribute to Crystal without getting the issues assigned?
Yes, but if you're going to do any significant change, it's better to start with the issue in order to get discussions on what's the best way to tackle that. Because you might do a lot of work, and then in the end, we might not be happy with the solution, and we think that another solution should be better or whatever. So it's better to start with the, thank you for bringing this, by the way. I should have mentioned this in my talk. About to discussing the issue, what's the best way to solve the problem or you want to fix, and then once we agree on how to do it, then you go and spend the time coding.
Awesome. Yeah, I think to sum that up, just wait. The issues are a better way to go. All right. Hopefully that answered your question. Just jumping ahead to her, Yvonne.
Yep.
What pain point was the invention of Crystal trying to solve?
Very good question. Thank you. So basically, the pain point was we love Ruby. We like how you could very easily write code and get that to do what you were expecting to do, but except when you made a mistake, and then you get null pointer exceptions, you get wrong method, whatever. So we wanted to fix that, and we also wanted to have a more efficient binary in the end. We have stories from people who had a Rails application with 3 servers, and they switched to a framework using Crystal, and then they basically cut it down to 1 server that is actually not super loaded. So Crystal is very efficient, and this was also another part that we wanted to solve.
Awesome.
How to get in touch? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Another question from Shamza31. Any suggestions for how to get the hang of Crystal?
I don't know. I guess it depends on how you like to learn. Not everybody has the same method. Not the same methodology works for everybody. To give you an idea, I start thinking, okay, I know these particular problems, like simple programs that I coded in some other language. how do I do that in this language? So I start from there, from very simple problems. And quickly I get bored of that. And then I start thinking, okay, what can I do? What can I build that is actually useful? And then continue from there. I'm not so much the kind of person who will go through a book first, but it's more the opposite. When I want to do something and I find myself that I don't know the answer, I go to the book. But this is me. For other people, might be better to read the book. We have a really nice book that you can find also in the homepage, in the page of Crystal, that where you can start learning from. Uh, you have the reference manual to read. Is pretty readable. Depends also on your background, how much experience you have with programming. It will be easier or harder. Um, so depends.
Awesome. Yeah, and I've linked the book there, crystallang.org. The reference book should be available via that link if you want to check it out. And it looks like we have
That's the
one last
reference.
question. Oh, sorry.
Pardon, that's the reference of the language. But there is a
Uh,
book that is more a book on Crystal, on how to build applications in Crystal, focusing on CLI applications and well, I don't remember. That is you can buy and have actually a copy with smelted pages, and for those who like that.
of course.
uh,
Um, I don't have the link for that, but if you want to get started with that link I added there, feel free to do so. And yeah, check out like I guess online, like just Google for the Crystal Lang book. I'm sure it'll be helpful. Um, Last question here from Rajat again. This is I believe, a follow up to the original question. So, how can people get in touch with you to discuss issues on the Crystal Lang open source project?
so basically, there is an issue tracker in GitHub, and there you can find thousands of issues. Um, so that's the easiest way. Uh, but in doubt, you can always shoot me a private message in Mastodon, and I will at some point read it. Of course, now for the sake of the hackathon, you can also ask in the channel of Loving MQ, and we'll be answering there too.
Awesome. All right. Well, it looks like that is all the questions we currently have. Just want to say thank you again, Beta, for jumping on board. You know, ton of great information that came from this. I know, it's difficult to do things live, and I'm checking out some of the links that you're sending here just to let y'all folks know. The GitHub repository for Crystal Lang is ticking along at the bottom of the screen. And you can also check out crystal-lang.org/learning. And the channel is Ask Lavin MQ on the Discord. So make sure you check us out. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in there. I'll be sure to go ahead and remediate them for you, get them over to the teams that are going to be involved with Global Hack Week open source. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Once again, Beta, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I want y'all to keep it locked in because we do have another workshop coming on right after this. Learn about green software with GitHub sustainability. Should be great. And yeah, looking forward to seeing y'all again a little bit later today. And outside of that, have a good one. Good luck with all of your open source contributions. Thanks again, Beta. I appreciate it. Have a good one, y'all.